Hello, BookTube. I have an old friend who runs a church here in Boston, and he gently reminded me just recently that I haven't seen him in the new year. We have been corresponding quite a bit about the Book of Exodus, but but I haven't seen him in a while, and so I made time this morning to go and do that. Even though it was meant leaving the little bean, it meant leaving my baby bean, and it was also a warm it's a warm day here in Boston in January in 2023. Uh, but we had been emailing, so our conversation was in order, and also I'd been emailing back and forth and helping quite a bit a young sacristan of his that who's got papers and exams that he really needs to bounce some information off and maybe a guiding hand with. So it seemed pregnant. The time seemed right to go, and the fringe benefit, those of you who watch this channel will already know, is that my friend used to run a kind of an informal charity shop, a jumble sale, in a couple of rooms of the basement of his church. And then COVID sort of complicated that because his congregation is very old. And the books keep coming in. The books keep accumulating. I'm helping him out with that as well. Pretty much everybody that's going to get vaccinated has been vaccinated already. He's being extremely conservative, largely because his superiors in the church hierarchy are being extremely conservative. I think we could easily resume the sale with a minimal. If the Boston Public Library can resume its in-person book sale, then I think he can. But in the meantime, there was a giant room full of boxes and boxes and boxes of books. And when I go there, he always tells me, you can take as many books as you want. Fill a bag, fill a box, whatever. Always he refers to it as payment for services rendered. I never really think of it that way. I I love to help out his parishioners or his sacristan or he himself or anything like that. We once upon a time had an informal arrangement where I would sometimes talk to his congregation. His superiors put the kibosh on that once they learned that it was a semi-regular thing because A, I'm not in his congregation, and B, I'm not a Christian. And that they sort of took a cold view of that. But I offered to pay, but he said, no, take as many as you want, and my sacristan, who's a wonderful young guy, will drive you home with them. So don't worry about carrying them. Don't worry about the load. Just have to be, hi, baby. How you doing? Mm-hmm. How's the baby? Uh, so I got a pile of books. Now, I don't know if there's a categorical difference that you can tell between the type of book that I would get at this particular, basement room or the type of books that I would get at the Brattle Bookshop. But I got a lot of stuff that I thought was pretty interesting. There are probably some keepers in this pile. I got a ton of mass market paperbacks, ton of paperbacks, and I think one hardcover that I was amazed to find. So we'll save that for last. So the paperbacks, a lot of the stuff will be familiar here. I found, for instance, the mass market paperback edition of John Gardner's Grendel that I originally read and fell in love with. I love this author. I think he's one of the more serious and one of the more interesting authors from the latter half of the 20th century in American literature. It depresses me that he is forgotten. I look at authors like him or Gil Sorrentino or John Barth, and I wish they were better known. I wish that they were talked about, that sort of thing. And actually, I could say the same thing about Cheever, other than his short stories. Virtually nobody talks about his novels anymore. Instead, Norman Mailer gets inducted into the Library of America. But this is, as you could tell from the title, a lot of you probably read this in school. This is a very brief novel from an author who tended to be prolix, set from the point of view of Grendel in Beowulf. And I haven't read it in quite some time. The idea of reading it, of revisiting it in this little mass market is wonderful. That is a wonderful idea. I will probably do that. And just be really careful. I'll try to be really careful with my mass markets. Then these next two are mass market classics. One is Bantam, which I sort of like. This is the McAndrew, I believe. Yes, this is the Andrew McAndrew translation of the Brothers Karamazov in the old Penguin mass market paperback. in pretty good condition. I've noticed in the course of my book journeying that these old mass markets tend to hold up fairly well. To reread, I bet I get a reread out of this, and it's on my mind, very much so, because Michael Katz has a new translation of Brothers Karamazov coming out in the spring. That I'm going to want the McAndrew version. I'm going to want the Constance Garnett and the mods and Peviar and Volkonsky. I'm going to want all of that in my mind, definitely in my mind, rereads of all of those things when I get to it. And then this next one is an old Signet classic, and I love these. I have a whole shelf of these old Signet mass market paperback classics, and I found one today that I have a long history with, not only reading but teaching. And this is the Sidney Monas translation of Crime and Punishment. This old edition, these books all look like this. I've got probably 30 of these now. And I grab them whenever I see them. If they're in any kind of good shape, I always do a quick survey to make sure they're not written in, because these were very popular in schools. But this one is clean, and I kind of like the cover design. I like this cover design more than I like this one. This one is fairly nondescript, whereas that's Raskolnikov. And in his mind, obsessing in his mind, is his landlady. So that's a neat, sort of understated cover. I'm very happy to have found this. Then this next batch, I found a batch of books. I read this whole series when it came out, I think in the 70s. And I haven't read it since. I haven't touched it since. I really don't know what to make of it. And I didn't find the whole series. I just found 4 out of, I think, 12 or 13. These are the Children of the Lion series. Some of you will remember this. These were old biblical era historical novels by Peter Danielson. This is The Deliverer. I don't know. This is book number 9. Okay, so it went on for a long time. I wonder if this will tell me. Maybe this is a reprint, so it will tell me how many there were. No, this only lists 9. So if there were ones, I'm sure that there were ones after this, and that they aren't listed there. I love this cover illustrator. Is it San Julian? Is that his name? He was very popular in the late 70s and early 80s. He got a lot of cover work. San Julian, yes. And so I admit, this is kind of the Sphinx in the background there. This is just quasi-biblical history. I don't think, if I remember correctly, not most of these novels are not explicit historical novels about Jacob or Esau or Moses or whatever. Instead, it's sort of kind of Kent Family Chronicle versions of biblical era history. What does this one say? Evil, like the shadow of approaching night, crept into the lands of Egypt and spread upriver to the rich kingdom of Nubia. The descendants of the Hebrew Joseph felt the whip of slavery, and the true pharaohs vanished as a cult of perverse cruelty claimed the people's heart. But a prophecy had decreed the birth of a savior, his fate to be tied to the children of the lion, the clan that bore the mark and the curse of Cain. Even now, from the distant city of Babylon, a tormented son of this secret tribe is returning to Egypt. With him will come a sword sharp and strong enough to liberate a land. So you see what I mean? Joseph is mentioned, but these characters are not in the Bible, most of them, if I remember correctly. And you've got the San Julian cover there. This great artwork, just fantastic. I have a lot of covers by this guy. He'll probably be best known to you. You might not recognize the name, but probably you have seen at least his best known cover. He did the cover for the mass market paperback of The Name of the Rose. Umberto Eco's Name of the Rose. And that mass market paperback, the hardcover did well, but the mass market paperback with the San Julian cover sold like crazy. It made Eco an incredibly wealthy man, where he'd been a popular and respected novelist before that. That paperback edition in America started giving him bank return statements that he couldn't believe. so you know that artwork at least. And I got a bunch of these, and I think all the ones I got have San Julian covers. This is book number 12. Okay, so this series went on at least to 12 books. This is The Promised Land. They're almost a stereotypical fantasy cover. But this is the same thing. Cassandra, the dark prophetess, had foretold how the unshakable walls of the mightiest city of the world at last came tumbling down. but no one heard her anguished cries as one nation rushed madly into a terrible war over a beautiful woman, and another, calling themselves the chosen people, marched across the unforgiving desert to fulfill the promise of their God. So is this maybe the last in the series? I don't know. I grabbed it. I want to reread. I haven't reread these in forever. Then there's this great big chunker of a thing. This is the Shepherd Kings, which is book 2. Oh no, book 1 in this series, I believe, was called Children of the Lion, and I don't think I saw that today. But given how many boxes there were, and this is not a San Julian cover. This is somebody else. I don't know if this is even credited. Oh, look at this. We get little headshots of the cast. How interesting. Are you going to tell me who did the cover illustration here? You're telling me who the chairman of the board is. Well, Louis Glanzman did those headshots. Maybe Louis Glanzman did the cover as well. This was also the cover style for the first book in the series. I remember it, but I don't think I saw it today. There's the Shepherd Kings, and it's huge. It's twice the size. And then there's this one. This is book number 8 in Children of the Lion. This is Sword of Glory. It drew my attention. Can't imagine why. This is. See, you've got all these tableaux on the back as well. Desert winds carried the smoke of battle from the Nile's black lands, stronghold of the last Shepherd King, to the red lands conquered by that king's greatest enemy, his own son Kamos. But even at the very edge of victory, defeat threatened the children of the Lion. And this also mentions the prophecy of Joseph, but Joseph is not in here. Instead, there are other people involved in other things. So I got 4 of the children of the Lion. That ought to be. I don't remember if this series. When I read them originally, I read them in order and I binged them. So I actually don't remember whether or not the individual books stand up as individual books. So I might have sunk myself here because I didn't get anything in order. I didn't start with number 1. I can always go back and find the others if I need to have the whole set. And it could be, if for instance I were to delve into Sword of Glory, it could be that these stink. In which case, I won't care about going back and reading them in order. I won't bother. I have enough now to know whether or not this series stinks. I remember I binged them when I read them the first time that I read them. And I remember being really confused. There are some books in this series that really read different from other books in the same series. So I don't know what Peter Danielson, maybe he had a drinking problem, but there are books that don't read anything like the other books in the series, and then you go back to other things. I don't know if reading these 4 will reproduce that uneven reading experience. Then these next 2 are for a beloved BookTube event. These are in terrible shape. I am actually going to have to reinforce them, and I'm not the first one. Somebody reinforced them before me. They're mass market westerns. This is The Bleeding Land by Giles Lutz. Look at that cover. Look at all this foreground, which actually serves to highlight the fact that this guy, there's the buttes of Arizona in the background, he is looking over his shoulder. He's running from something. And it's the drama of the story that we don't need it and we don't need to know it. It's just a classic Western cover. I love Western covers, old Western covers, so much, a lot of them. And I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about Giles Lutz. I don't think I read any Westerns of his when June on the Range was occurring last June. So I'm just stocking up on Western authors. This cover actually came off, and somebody had to tape it back on, and they didn't line it up correctly. But I will have to reinforce this in order to read it. But for all I know, Giles Lutz is another one of these Western authors that I encountered so much last June on the Range that were insanely prolific. They wrote 200 books, something like that, and then 200 more under a different pseudonym. Same thing with this next one. This is going to require life-saving reinforcement, and even then I'm only going to get through it once. They're obviously owned by the same person. This is Shadow Mountain by Bliss Lomax, which really sounds like a pen name. They called him McLean, one man alone against impossible odds. And once again, the cover was off this thing and someone just attached it. and I will follow suit. I don't plan on either one of these things surviving June on the Range. So I will reinforce them and hope to get one extra reading out of them, and then I'll bury them both in the backyard. Then we have the last mass market paperback, which was a romance. I found a romance. There are actually a bunch of romances, but uh, none of them really appealed to me. And then I saw this one and realized that I don't have anything by this author and haven't read anything by this author in a long time. So I found Texas with an exclamation point, lucky. I don't want to block the bean. There's my little baby. Where's my little baby girl? We don't have any sunlight today. The rain has stopped. We don't have any sunlight, so she's not herself. This is the cover. Rather an attractive cover design. This is the first book in a series. I think that's what drew me to it. I think, if I remember correctly, wasn't there a whole series where it was Texas exclamation point and then a different word? I'm pretty sure that's what the series looked like. But this is charismatic and easy on the eyes. Lucky Tyler is a born rebel. His romantic conquests have earned him his nickname, while his temper gives him his reputation as the family hothead. One night he gets in a fight over a woman in distress, followed by a night of passion neither of them will soon forget. So, a contemporary Texas romance. That was the only romance that I saw that really intrigued me. And then we move on to the trade paperbacks. And the first trade paperback I want to show you was a complete indulgence on my part. Ridiculous. The first thought I had was, I want the whole set like this. But I am never going to find the whole set like this, and I know that. I should have left it behind. But I don't have any of these in physical form. I gave the whole set of them away that I last had, so I grabbed it. These are the Brother Cadfael mysteries by Ellis Peters. They're historical mysteries about a soldier turned monk who encounters murder mysteries at his monastery. And every murder mystery draws a little bit more on Cadfael's own experiences, on his own varied life, which tends to be far more varied than the cloistered, no pun intended, the cloistered lives of his fellow brethren. Which puts him in a perfect position. It's an enchanted murder mystery series. It really is just pitch perfect. Like Rumpel that I mentioned yesterday. These are like that. And they're like Rumpel in another way, in that they are a series, but you don't need to read them in order. They pretty much stand on their own. Once you get the gimmick, the essential gimmick, that Brother Cadfael is a retired soldier who is now a monk. So he hasn't been in holy orders. He hasn't been an innocent virgin his whole life. Once you get that, the books stand on their own. And I found this. I found Brother Cadfael's Penance in a UK trade paperback. Nice, big, hefty thing. And the minute I saw it, I thought, well, I would like all of the UK trade paperbacks of the Brother Cadfael mysteries. I'm never going to find them. I'm never going to see another one. Just this one. But I grabbed it. I don't have any other Brother Cadfaels. I would gladly reread. One, it doesn't matter what order they're in. Then I found this lovely thing. This lovely trade paperback that I don't think I saw. This had to have come out when I was back in the reviewing game. Let me double check and make sure that is the case. Yeah, 2010. So I was back in the reviewing game, but I don't think I ever got this. I don't think I knew it existed. This is A Pleasure to Burn. It's Fahrenheit 451 Stories by Ray Bradbury. So all kinds of things that presage the novel Fahrenheit 451 deal with similar subjects, that sort of thing, in a lovely Harper trade paperback. Very little Bradbury here at Hyde Cottage, very little. So I grabbed this. He's fun to read. He is definitely fun to read. And there's bound to be an upcoming BookTube event that I can yoke it to. Then this next one, I've had many, many copies of this book. When did this come out? The early 1990s. I have been reading and recommending this book. Yeah, 1994. I have been reading and recommending this book forever. And it underwent a huge resurgence in backlist sales just a couple of years ago for obvious reasons. This is Laurie Garrett's book, The Coming Plague, which in 1994 was all about emerging pathogens, Ebola, that sort of thing, where they're coming from, why they're emerging, what are the implicit dangers in exotic bushmeat markets, or the fact that packaged tourism and travel industry is going to parts of the world where no one's ever been before, and all sorts of people are therefore encountering all sorts of biomes for which they have no natural immunities. And a large chunk of this book, the best chunk of this book, on AIDS uh, when it was still raging across the country, when it was still on everybody's mind, and when pandemics tend to make people think not only about the pandemic in their midst, but also about what the next one is going to be like. Is there anything we can do about this? Douglas Preston's book also had his book, The Hot Zone, also had a huge resurgence in sales thanks to COVID. This thing started selling like crazy thanks to COVID, and I saw that. And I when COVID first broke in early 2020 and finally made itself aware that it was going to be a huge thing, a life-changing thing, a world-changing thing, I went looking for my copy of this thing and I didn't have it. So I have a trade paperback now that I'll just put in a permanent part. Then this next trade paperback, I have this in ebook. I have a Library of America volume of this. I have a hardcover of this, but this trade paperback was sitting there. It was free, and it's big and tough. It's been through a lot. It's a little bit warped, a little bit water warped, and still indestructible. So I grabbed it. I love this. It's a classic work of history. It's The Last Battle by Cornelius Ryan. This is a story about the battle for Berlin, the end of the war in the West. And it's fantastic. If you haven't read Cornelius Ryan, he is The Last Battle, The Longest Day. He is someone to read. He is a World War II historian to read. He is terrific, absolutely terrific. And I saw this trade paperback and couldn't leave it behind. And then I was wrong. I actually have two hardcovers to show you. One is huge, and one is even huger. This is this absolutely huge thing here that I want to revisit. I want to revisit this and see if it still pulls at me. This is Tom Clancy, but not Tom Clancy. This is Full Force and Effect, a Tom Clancy novel by Mark Greaney. Huge thing. So this stars Jack Ryan and the campus characters. It stars all sorts of characters that Tom Clancy actually did flesh out. But there's not even a pretext that this is done on some sort of lost outline or something like that. This is just Mark Greaney. Mark Greaney wrote this book. Why Tom Clancy's name is on the cover, especially so prominent, I do not know. Any more than I understand why when you open the book and you go to the list of previous books, it will say also by Tom Clancy and list all of these books when everything from here on is not by Tom Clancy. It was Mark Greaney's. He got the brief to write Tom Clancy books, deal with Tom Clancy characters, write books in Tom Clancy's world, and it was through that brief that I noticed Mark Greaney as a character. Putnam was sending me the latest so-called Tom Clancy novel, and I would read them and started to notice, boy, this is really good. This is really well done. And at the time, I was still fairly on the fence, fairly new to necrofiction, to this business where people's literary careers continue long after they're dead. And it occurred to me then, well, I should look up this Mark Greaney guy. And he had already written 2 or 3 Gray Man novels, which is his own creation, and they were great too. And I now know Greaney mostly for the Gray Man novel, so I want to go back to a Jack Ryan novel and see if this really does appeal to me. I have a feeling that it will. Talent is talent. And then the final hardcover here, which I was not expecting to find. This is more of a Brattle find than all the rest of these things, the type of thing you would find at a church jumble sale. This last one, I was not expecting to see this, and it gives me a chance to do a Brattle activity. The Brattle bookshop here in Boston often gives me the chance to have a second chance at a book that I had. I got it. It was fairly new. I read it. I assessed it. And then I got rid of it. Either mailed it to one of you or, donated it or whatever. And then it crops up at the Brattle and I see it and realize, oh, I do want to revisit that. I shouldn't have got rid of that. That actually was a keeper from that year. It's always a tough thing to know. I have decided, I've made the peremptory executive decision in 2023. I have an entire shelf of the books that survived all of my weekly and monthly winnowing in 2022. I have an entire shelf of 2022 books, and I've made the executive decision not to touch that shelf at all this year. I'm leaving it the way it is to make sure that at the end of the year, if I'm looking back, I have all of those books from 2022, all the ones that stood out. And this one stood out from its year. what was its year? I want to say 2020. 2018. It's this. It's by Roland Jackson, and it is The Ascent of John Tyndall. This is a book about the great Victorian polymath, John Tyndall, from Oxford University Press. I got this. We probably hauled it on this channel. I read it. I thought it was incredibly good, very complex, very nuanced. And then I got rid of it. It was on my biography shelf forever and ever, and then I just got rid of it. So I found it today for free, just sitting there in a box. I certainly grabbed it. I will certainly give it a reread in the course of 2023. And Tyndall's life is absolutely fantastic. The detail that I think he's most known for now is his identification of what we would now consider to be greenhouse gases and what they're actually doing in the atmosphere. Although to me, the most evocative detail of his life is a personal detail. It's not anything to do with he was an industrious working and publishing writer in a whole bunch of different fields. But he was also sick, and he married very, very late in life. I think he married when he was 60 or something like that. And his life ended with an accidental overdose. He was taking a medication for a medical ailment, and he accidentally was given an overdose by his wife. It was an accident, and he knew that it had happened after he took the dose, but before it had its effect, he knew that she had killed him and commented on it to her. I think that's just a fascinating detail. That's his final years in this book are done with a great deal of sympathy. They weren't easy years, and that moment and all sorts of other moments are done really well in here. Tremendously happy to find this. So that's a lot of books. that was sort of an unexpected book haul here. So we have The Ascent of John Tyndall. We have Full Force and Effect, a big Jack Ryan novel. That's going to go on the relatively immediate pile. The Last Battle by Cornelius Ryan. Always stand to have another copy of this. The Coming Plague by Laurie Garrett. Essential plague literature. Brother Cadfael's Penance. We'll see. Maybe I'll find one more UK trade paperback of this. We have A Pleasure to Burn, a collection of Fahrenheit 451 connected Bradbury stories. And then a bunch of mass markets. We've got Texas, lucky, a contemporary romance novel. We have The Bleeding Land by Giles Lutz and Shadow Mountain by Bliss Lomax. Two westerns for June on the Range. We have, I'm never going to be able to do this here. Let's do the mass markets so that we're not destroying these things. I got, how many did I get? 4 of these things? Yes, 4 of The Children of the Lion. 4 of these old historical novels that some of you may remember. 2 Dostoevsky's, Crime and Punishment, and The Brothers Karamazov. This is on the list to read. I'll give this mass market paperback a workout as I bone up on The Brothers Karamazov in order to review the Michael Katz translation coming out later this year, one of the major translations of 2023. And finally, Grendel by John Gardner in this cute little mass market paperback. So not bad as far as a book haul goes. I'm pretty happy with it. It's not quite the Brattle, but it was a lot of fun to talk Exodus. So I'm going to be back. I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.